What would you do if someone worth billions got down on one knee and begged you to marry them, but you were just the person who cleaned their office every night? And what if the one thing they asked for in return completely destroyed everything they thought they knew about success? Stay until the end, because what happened next will leave you speechless. This is the story of Margaret Chen, a self-made billionaire who had the world at her fingertips but couldn't hold on to the one thing that mattered most. And Carlos Martinez, a night janitor earning minimum wage, who taught her a lesson worth more than all the money in the world. What you're about to hear will make you stop, look at your own life, and ask yourself a question you've been avoiding for way too long. Margaret Chen wasn't born into wealth. She grew up in a cramped two-bedroom apartment in San Francisco where the walls were so thin you could hear the neighbors fighting every night. She shared a room with two sisters, slept on a mattress on the floor, and wore hand-me-down clothes that never quite fit right. Her mom cleaned houses until her hands were raw and bleeding. Her dad drove a taxi 16 hours a day and still couldn't make enough to cover rent. Margaret remembers one night when she was 9 years old. Her mom was crying at the kitchen table, holding an eviction notice, and her dad was yelling that he didn't know what else to do. Little Margaret stood in the doorway, watching her parents fall apart, and she made a promise to herself right then and there. She would never be poor. She would never feel this helpless. She would never let money control her life like this. That promise became her obsession. While other kids played outside, Margaret stayed in the library teaching herself how to code. While her friends went to dances and parties, she built apps and studied business until her eyes hurt. She didn't date. She didn't hang out. She just worked. And worked. And worked. And it paid off in ways she never imagined. By 25, she sold her first app for $2 million and cried in her car because she'd finally done it. By 30, she launched a company that revolutionized cloud storage and made her first billion. By 35, Forbes called her one of the most powerful women in technology. She'd crushed that promise to her 9-year-old self. She was rich, powerful, untouchable. But here's what nobody tells you about winning. Sometimes when you win at business, you lose at everything else. Margaret married a guy named David when she was 28. He was kind, patient, everything she thought she wanted. They had a daughter named Emma, and for exactly 2 years and 3 months, Margaret felt like maybe she could have it all. The company, the family, the perfect life. But then the company exploded in ways she couldn't control. Investors wanted more meetings. Clients needed her in different cities every week. Opportunities kept coming, and she kept saying yes because that's what winners do, right? They say yes. They push harder. They sacrifice. Except she didn't realize what she was sacrificing until it was too late. David tried to hold on. He really did. But there's only so many nights you can eat dinner alone. Only so many times you can watch your daughter ask where mommy is and not have a good answer. Only so many times you can feel like you're invisible in your own marriage. So one Tuesday morning, David packed his bags, looked Margaret in the eyes, and said something that still haunts her to this day. You chose the company over us, and the sad part is you don't even see it. You think you're building a future for Emma, but you're actually stealing her childhood. One day you're going to wake up and realize you traded your daughter's love for numbers in a bank account. And you can't get that back, Margaret. You can't buy that back. Then he left, took a settlement, got joint custody and walked out of her life. And Margaret told herself she was fine. She buried herself deeper in work. She told herself David just didn't understand ambition. She told herself Emma would thank her one day for building this empire. She told herself a lot of lies. Emma was 4 when her dad left, and for the next 9 years, that little girl grew up in a mansion that felt more like a prison. Sure, she had designer clothes and a room the size of most people's apartments. She went to the best schools and took piano lessons and had a trust fund that would make her a millionaire by 18. But none of that mattered when she blew out the candles on her birthday cakes, year after year making the same wish. She just wanted her mom, not her mom's money, not her mom's nanny, not her mom's assistant making excuses, just her mom. But Margaret was always somewhere else, London, Tokyo, New York, and even when she was physically home, she wasn't really there. She was on her laptop during breakfast, on conference calls during dinner, checking emails while Emma tried to show her a drawing from school. Margaret kept telling herself she was doing this for Emma, building generational wealth, creating security, making sure her daughter never knew what it felt like to be poor. But Emma was learning something else entirely. She was learning that money matters more than moments, that success matters more than presents, that her mom's company mattered more than she did. Then came that Thursday night in October that changed everything. Margaret had been at the office for 18 hours, reviewing documents until the words blurred together. Her neck ached. Her head pounded. She couldn't remember what her own bedroom looked like because she'd been sleeping on the couch in her office for 3 days straight. That's when she heard the vacuum cleaner and saw him, Carlos Martinez, the night janitor, humming some old Spanish song while he worked. This smile on his face like he was exactly where he wanted to be, doing exactly what he wanted to do. He stopped at her office door and that smile faded into concern. "Ms. Chen, you're here again. That's 5 nights in a row now. When do you sleep?" Margaret laughed, but it came out bitter. "Sleep is for people who aren't trying to build empires, Carlos." Carlos stepped into her office, something he'd never done before. "Can I ask you something, ma'am? When you build this empire, who's it for?" The question hit Margaret like a slap. "What do you mean?" "I mean, who are you building it for? Because if it's for your daughter, you should know that kids don't want empires. They just want their parents." Margaret felt something crack inside her chest. "You don't understand. I'm securing her future, making sure she never has to struggle like I did." Carlos nodded slowly. "I understand more than you think. I work nights, so I can coach my grandson's baseball team during the day. I make maybe 30,000 a year. My wife and I live in a small house with a mortgage we'll probably never pay off. But you know what? My grandkids run to me when I walk in the door. My wife saves me dinner even when I'm working late. I got time with the people I love. And with all respect, Miss Chen, that makes me richer than you." After Carlos left that night, Margaret couldn't focus. His words kept echoing in her head. Was she really richer than him? She had $3 billion and a daughter who barely spoke to her. He had nothing and a family that loved him. Who was actually winning here? Over the next few months, those late-night conversations with Carlos became the only thing Margaret looked forward to. He'd tell her stories about his grandkids' soccer games, about the garden he was planting with his wife, about Sunday dinners where 3 generations crowded around one table and laughed until their stomachs hurt. And Margaret would listen with tears in her eyes because she realized she didn't have any stories like that. She had acquisition deals and board meetings and revenue reports, but she didn't have memories. She didn't have moments. She didn't have love. One night in December, snow falling outside, Margaret asked the question that had been eating her alive. "Carlos, how do you do it? How are you so happy when you have so little?" Carlos leaned against his cleaning cart and looked at her with eyes that had seen a lot of life. "Miss Chen, you think I have little because you're measuring wrong. You measure life in dollars. I measure it in moments. You count what's in your bank. I count what's in my heart. And by my measurement, I'm the richest man alive." That night, Margaret went home and tried to talk to Emma, really talk. But Emma just stared at her phone and gave one-word answers. When Margaret asked if she wanted to do something together that weekend, Emma said something that shattered her. "Why, so you can cancel like you always do?" "Let me get excited and then break my heart again." "I'm 13, Mom. I'm not stupid anymore. I know where I rank in your life. Somewhere below your company and above your dry cleaning. Maybe." Margaret tried to argue, tried to explain, but Emma cut her off. "Save it. I've heard it all before. You're building my future. You're working hard for me. You're doing this for us. But you're not, Mom. You're doing this for you. Because if you were doing it for me, you'd be here, and you're never here." Emma went to her room and closed the door, and Margaret sat on the couch in her mansion, surrounded by expensive furniture and artwork, and all the things money could buy, and felt completely alone. The breaking point came 2 weeks later, on Emma's 13th birthday. Margaret had promised, sworn on everything that she'd be there. She'd planned a party, invited Emma's friends, cleared her entire calendar. She was going to prove that she could be the mom Emma needed. But at 5 in the morning, Tokyo called. $300 million was about to walk out the door, and only Margaret could stop it. Just a quick 2-day trip. She'd be back Saturday morning. She'd make the party. She promised. Except the meetings ran long. The investor needed more convincing, and by the time Margaret landed back in San Francisco, it was Sunday evening. Emma's birthday had come and gone without her. Again, Margaret walked into the house and found Emma sitting on the stairs, still wearing her party dress from 2 days ago. She looked at her mom with eyes that were completely empty of hope and said 6 words that destroyed Margaret completely. "I don't need you anymore, Mom." That night, Margaret sat alone in the dark and realized what she'd done. She'd won at business and lost her daughter. She'd built an empire and destroyed a family. She'd become everything she swore she'd be, and nothing that actually mattered. 2 weeks later, Margaret found Carlos in the break room. Her hands were shaking. Her voice was breaking, and in front of witnesses who would never forget what they saw. She got down on her knees in front of a janitor and begged, "Carlos, I need your help. I'm drowning, and I don't know how to swim anymore. Will you teach me, please? I'll pay you anything. $1 million. 10 million. Name your price. Just please teach me how to be happy like you." Carlos looked at her, and for a moment, Margaret saw pity in his eyes. Not the cruel kind, the sad kind, the kind you feel when you see someone who has everything and nothing at the same time. "I don't want your money, Ms. Chen," Carlos said quietly. "Money won't fix what's broken. Here's what I want. For 6 months you work 40 hours a week, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and every single night you have dinner with Emma. You sit together, you eat together, you talk. No phones, no laptops, no excuses. You show up for your daughter like she's the most important thing in your life." "He is. That's my price." Margaret stared at him in disbelief. "That's it? You just want me to work less?" "I want you to live more," Carlos said. "Before it's too late. Before Emma stops waiting for you. Before you wake up one day and realize you can't remember what her voice sounds like. That's what I want." Margaret took the deal, and it saved her life. The first week was chaos. She left work at 5:30 and felt like she was abandoning ship. Her executives panicked. Her assistant called 15 times. But Margaret didn't answer. She went home and cooked dinner with Emma. Well, they tried to cook. They burned everything and ended up ordering pizza. But they laughed together for the first time in years. Carlos checked in every week. He shared stories, gave advice, reminded Margaret why she was doing this, and slowly, painfully, beautifully, everything changed. Emma started talking again, started smiling, started trusting that maybe, just maybe, her mom was really going to show up this time. And Margaret realized something that broke her heart and healed it at the same time. Her company didn't need her. Her executives were capable. Her team was strong. The business ran fine without her constant presence. But Emma needed her. And Margaret had almost missed her chance to be what her daughter needed most. Not a billionaire, just a mom. 6 months later, Margaret stepped down as CEO. She set up scholarships for kids whose parents worked nights. She funded programs for work-life balance. She made sure Carlos could retire with dignity. And 3 years after that night in the break room, a journalist asked Margaret what the best investment of her life was. Margaret smiled with tears in her eyes and said, "The night I got on my knees and begged a janitor to teach me what it means to be rich, because I learned that you can have all the money in the world and still be the poorest person alive, and you can have nothing but love and be wealthier than kings." She paused, looked directly at the camera, and said something that everyone watching would remember forever. If you're watching this and you've been telling yourself that you're working hard for your family, stop lying. If you're not there for them, you're not working for them. You're working instead of them. And one day you'll wake up and realize you succeeded at everything except the only thing that mattered.